Hello and welcome to the second in the series of podcasts from Disability on Screen. We're an internship that we're looking at the representation of disabled people in film. My name's Nathaniel.
Gareth.
Ella. Hannah.
And we're the four interns who held seminars and Q&As on some of our favourite films and the way that they present disabled people in the media. So today we're going to be talking about my screening, which was of The Theory of Everything. It's a 2015 film directed by James Marsh. I'm sure you've seen it. It won many awards, including the Academy Award for Best Actor for Eddie Redmayne, who played Professor Stephen Hawking. So this film is tackling the life of Professor Stephen Hawking, world-famous physicist, pop culture icon, who was diagnosed with ALS at the age of 21, otherwise known as motor neurone disease. Which basically meant that his body just went into complete shutdown, leaving only his mind completely intact and very few motor functions. But despite the fact that he was given 2 years to live, he eventually ended up, I think he only died last year. Also, I found out, this is mental, my screening of The Theory of Everything was on the 1 year anniversary of his death.
Oh, no way,
I know,
what?
Which was completely accidental.
That's crazy.
Like, that was nuts. Someone told me afterwards. Anyway. And so he only died last year at the age of 71, I think. So he completely demolished his life expectancy, which was incredible. And my seminar, as you guys know, was talking about should able-bodied actors play disabled characters, which was a really interesting topic in my mind, and I think you guys found it as well, because there's a lot of kind of debate around it from the disabled actor community in talking about whether we're taking away roles from this underrepresented group of actors, and whether it's even appropriate to have able-bodied actors pretending to be these disabled characters. Mm-hmm. So I did a lot of research into it beforehand, and there's a chap called Adam Pearson, who some people might have heard of. He directed and kind of hosted this BBC documentary called The Ugly Face of Disability Hate Crime. And Adam has a disease where he has he has several benign tumours all over his body, including on his face. So it's a very large tumour on his face that obscures most of his features. But he's also an actor. He's been in...
Under the Skin, wasn't it?
Yes,
yeah.
Under the Skin. Thank you, because I could not remember the name of it.
You're welcome.
Shape of Water, which is not the same thing. Under the Skin was a 2013 film, I think, starring Scarlett Johansson. And yeah, he had a major role in that. So he's been in a pretty big blockbuster movie, as well as kind of hosting these documentaries. And he kind of struck out because the BBC are doing an adaptation of The Elephant Man this year. It's kind of a 6-part TV version. Obviously, The Elephant Man, for people who don't know, is the story of Joseph Merrick, a chap who was alive in the 1800s and had a unknown disease, but probably something similar to what Adam suffers from, that basically meant that he had lots of benign tumours all over his body, and was paraded as a freak show and curiosity in Victorian England. And kind of Adam hit out because Charlie Heaton, who plays Jonathan in Stranger Things, it's a good reference point for people, he's been cast as the Elephant Man, and Adam wasn't even offered an audition when he inquired about it. So there's a lot of talk in the media about something called cripping up. So you're aware of blacking up, Gareth? We talked about it before. Would you like to tell us what blacking up is?
Changing the colour of your skin for a character,
So
basically.
putting on black makeup, basically, or it can be the same thing, changing your physical appearance to appear the race that you're not. Famously, Laurence Olivier blacked up as Othello in the 60s, which now you just look back and cringe on. But kind of people in the mainstream media, particularly The Guardian, are talking about cripping up, as in actors playing roles of disabled characters for a disability that they don't have. And they actually point to Eddie Redmayne in The Theory of Everything as problematic because of that. So if we look at the questions and kind of what was discussed on the night, my first question to the audience was, is the role of Stephen Hawking a role that could have been played by a disabled actor? And what are your guys' opinions on that, first of all?
I think one of the main arguments kind of in Eddie's favour is that it's the story of how his disability progressively affected him, and how he went from being able-bodied to disabled. you can't exactly do that with someone who has a condition like Stephen Hawking's. And everyone with that condition, it's kind of unique to each person. So you'd kind of have to have the person act anyway to look more like Stephen. And I think you mentioned that Eddie was picked because he looked a lot like Stephen when he was that age. So it just kind of makes sense. And I think Stephen himself was really happy with how Eddie depicted him, right?
He was very much on board for the entirety of the production, and visited the set a few times as well, and has said nothing but good things about the film. It does feel like there's a tiny bit of an argument of people who are, people who aren't disabled and are literally just making a fuss of this to be able to critique it in some way.
Pretty much, yeah. It's kind of an easy target, isn't it?
Yeah. There's a guy in the audience as well who kind of said, I think it was Adam actually, kind of said that if you did, because I kind of suggested, one of the suggestions is dual casting. So, kind of having Eddie perform the segments where he is able-bodied and then giving the role to an actor with ALS or motor neuron syndrome for the parts where he's completely disabled. And Adam quite rightly pointed out that it's kind of offensive to the disabled actor actually, because you're only giving them half, or you're saying you can't do that part. Do you know what I mean? Whereas it's more fair to have an open playing field where everyone can audition for the part, but only one person eventually ends up getting the part.
Plus, it would really stick out as well if the screen faded to black and then boom, it's someone completely different.
Yeah, the transition between the two could potentially be a problem, especially when you're trying to sell a movie and attract an audience.
Well, it's funny you say that, because question 2 was, is cripping up an issue? Should any role be able to be played by any actor? And one of the main arguments against cripping up being an issue is that movies are there to make money, aren't they?
Yeah.
So, it's
especially
an industry.
when it's someone like Stephen Hawking, who is, everyone knows him today for all of his work that he's done. You want to sell it, you want it to be the best production possible.
Yeah.
So naturally you're going to go for the biggest name actors to attract the audience, to attract the money in. So it's...
Yeah, unfortunately marketing is fickle, and people want to see recognisable faces in performances. And of course there are going to be up-and-comers from every angle, and you need new talent all the time. But I think the argument against it is that, would you get the same audience reaction for a new properly disabled actor, and would this be a multi-Academy Award-winning production with a box office of $138 million if it was just an unknown disabled actor? It's interesting, isn't it?
I mean, stories like the one you mentioned about the Elephant Man, just immediately casting an able-bodied person, I can see that as being an issue. Like, if you give people with disabilities a chance to get the role, that's fine. It has to be based on the quality of the person's acting, how much experience they've had, and how much justice they can do to the script and everything like that. But if they only specifically hire an actor because they're famous, then I think it's an issue.
I agree.
The opportunity has to be there for an even playing field.
Yeah.
There's a quote in my intro from a stage actor who portrayed Richard III last year, and he basically said that there should be an even playing field, and ideally anyone should be able to apply for any role, audition for any role, sorry. But his kind of suggestion was to take on one script in the theatre world per year from a disabled playwright, and cast at least one disabled actor per year as well, which is interesting. And obviously theatre's a different beast to film, but it's kind of still applicable. Do you guys think that would be a good way to go, or do you think that it shouldn't be by numbers, like it should literally be on merit?
I don't think it should be forced. No. It should be by merit to an extent. I don't think roles should be opened up specifically for disability. If they have the capacity and they're able to perform to the expectancy of the company and the theatres, by all means have as many as you want. It shouldn't be forced, and there shouldn't be a cap. I think
it's also specific to each film. Like Theory of Everything is an individual account. We all know who Stephen Hawking is, and his symptoms, as I said, his disability is very individual. So his symptoms will be different to someone else. So if you had someone else who had motor neuron disease, their symptoms might be different in the film and not reflect Stephen Hawking's disability.
That's a really good point. That's something that came up on the night, actually, wasn't it? That people said motor neuron is a massive spectrum, and it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone is at the same stage as Stephen Hawking, and then they're just acting motor neuron disease as well. Pretty and kind much. Of it has the danger of becoming a caricature, which is so disrespectful and definitely not what you want for a film about a real disease or disability.
You could also argue as well the film's not just about the disability, it's more about his scientific findings. So if you focus too much on the disability, it might take away from his achievements. Some may
individuality.
Yeah. It's interesting. I reckon, because I've obviously watched the film a few times now in prep for this and then at the seminar, it's probably about 70-30 in terms of disability and the findings of his research, I reckon. Which is a shame, because then it kind of defines his life by his disability rather than his research, actually. But that's interesting. Anyway, moving on. Then we kind of ask, does the film use the story of Stephen Hawking's life as inspiration porn for the sake of the able-bodied audience member? And so inspiration porn was something I found during my research. It was a term dubbed by a comedian called Stella Young. She's disabled herself, and she kind of has this bugbear with what she dubbed inspiration porn, which is basically when you see people share things on Facebook or Twitter, like pictures of a disabled kid running a marathon, or something like that, and then it comes with a caption of "What's your excuse?" or "Your excuse is invalid," and I can see how that would be incredibly disabling and patronising for a disabled person, that they're literally just there to make able-bodied people feel better about themselves. Exactly, and literally they're just there for us to say, "What's your excuse?" If a kid with X disability can run a marathon, why can I not? And it kind of makes them a means to an end. And people have a lot to say about the theory of everything in terms of this. A lot of people felt that the second to last scene, the penultimate scene, was quite inspiration porny.
Is that the one where he stands up?
Yes.
Yeah.
And they kind of found that problematic in general. So, for the context, it's right near the end, and he is pretty much the modern iteration of Stephen Hawking, living in our modern world now with his proper kitted out chair, and his disease has degenerated to the point where he can only do facial movements to make his computer work. And he the kind of audio goes and he stands up and he uncontorts and he picks up a girl's pen and puts it on her desk, and it's obviously, and then it cuts back and he's in the chair, and it's obviously showing him kind of wishing, obviously, that he was able-bodied again. But a lot of people found it quite offensive, which I don't think it's offensive. I think it's problematic in terms of filmmaking. I think it completely takes you out of it, and I think it breaks the verisimilitude that the film is working with so far.
It's really cheesy.
That's by the by. Is it inspiration porn when he says the really inspirational quote at the end, and everyone gets up and cheers and stuff, and all of his family and friends are there, and it's like, it's very cheesy. He did Martha actually found out from me afterwards that he did actually say the quote at the end. So, because I was like, that is screenwriting all over, that's like trying to make the audience feel as warm as possible and pull some heartstrings. But apparently he did actually say the quote.
What's the quote?
Oh, God. Basically, you can achieve anything you want to, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But in like a scientific Stephen Hawking-y way.
Okay.
Did you find it problematic? Anyone?
I think that scene is quite irrelevant from, like you mentioned, it takes you away from the moment of the film, and it shows a different angle or a different, or his like imagination of wanting to be able to do that. But at the same time, in regards to inspiration porn, his quote as well, I think it's empowering and it's quite inspirational, but at the same time it's not saying, oh, I could do this or I could do that. It's your own, everyone's individual, like you said. Like he's when he was able and he was healthy, he's super intelligent, or he still is. That doesn't change that, but at the same time, that stays with him. Despite his disability and his health deteriorating, it stays with him throughout, and he continues his work and his research, which is incredible. It's like, in comparison to ourselves, like we have our own sort of interests, and what he says at the end, where he's like, "Oh, you can do anything you want," kind of thing, regardless of your ability and your physical capacity. It's individual. I don't know if that makes any sense or in what direction that goes, but it's more, I don't know.
It's tricky, isn't it? Because it is a true story, and he actually said those words on the stage, so it's not like they're manipulating.
But how everyone can take from that, you can do this because of what I've done, or despite my disability, like what's your excuse? I agree with it being, to an extent, inspiration porn, and people can be like, oh, I need to do this. It can be motivating in a way, but at the same time, like that's everyone's individual perception of it.
Yeah, that was kind of what people said at the Q&A as well, that they were kind of just like, it's actually a fair representation of his life.
Yeah.
And, that was kind of a key moment of a speech where he did actually say those words, and he was being uplifting and inspirational in that sense. So why wouldn't you? It's quite cynical to think everything is inspiration porn just because it is inspirational. Obviously, it's a double-edged sword, because that the screenwriters are going, this is going to get people crying like hell, and it is at the expense of someone's real life. It is included
for that.
Yeah.
To get that reaction and response from people.
I think there is some moments where it's inspirational, but there's also moments where you see the real struggle of it. Like there's a scene where you can see him, he's looking up at his child as he's trying to get up the stairs, and I think that's shown the pure, like, how difficult it must be. But then is that inspirational, trying to pull at the audience to feel sorry for him, or I don't know how. Well, I do like seeing the family side of it, because it's not just about his career. But,
it was interesting to see the degeneration of the family as well, and that's something we talk about a lot more in your seminar, isn't it?
Yeah.
But the way it kind of affects his relationship with his wife.
And those around him as well. Because her family, or his family, his parents say to her halfway through the film, like, we need to know who the child is.
Yeah,
like,
they end up very aggressive.
Exactly, so it's...
And, obviously the film is based on her memoirs, which is really, really interesting as well. So that obviously nothing is shied away from, despite the fact that she does kind of essentially start this implied affair with the choir master, such a cliche, halfway through the film. But it's sad, isn't it, to see the degeneration, and I think people kind of really responded to that in the seminar, that this wasn't just a film about him, it was also very much about her. And Felicity Jones is fantastic in the role.
Yeah, she is.
Completely denied the Oscar there, in my opinion. But we must rattle through the questions. And then the kind of last question was, because we covered most of the topics, but is, particularly in that scene with the pen at the end, is Stephen Hawking presented in any way that could be deemed as offensive in the film? What did you guys think?
I think that bit with the pen, I find it hard to think, was that scene about him as a character, or was it about how the audience responds to that scene? Because from the character's perspective, it just kind of makes sense that he would want to do that. But the scene's played off so, like we said, cheesily, that it's like, who was that scene for? Other than that, though, I think they do a great job, and Stephen himself agreed with that.
Yeah, I don't find anything in the film offensive, to be honest, and I don't think anyone at the seminar did either. They just found that the scene with the pen was an odd filmmaking choice that didn't really work, but it wasn't offensive in any way. Okay.
Which was a bit Oscar-basy, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, the whole film's massively Oscar-baited.
Yeah.
And that's, it's a big topic of Cripping Up. Like, actors have played characters with disabilities for years in order to get Oscars. Daniel Day-Lewis in My Left Foot, John Hurt in The Elephant Man, Sally Hawkins in The Shape of Everything. The Shape of Water. Brains frazzled.
The Theory of Water.
The Theory of Water. It's been something that Hollywood loves, and the Actors Guild loves to give awards for years and years and years. So it does have a kind of Oscar baity feel about it. But at the end of the day, it's telling a good story. It's doing it in a respectful way. I don't think there's any problem with this film particularly.
Yeah. I agree.
Nice. Okay, I'm glad we all agree.
Great.
Well, thanks for joining us in the second podcast of Disability on Screen. Hope you enjoyed it. Please catch us for the third one. Great. Cut. Thank you.